Be sure to subscribe and click on the bell for notifications on future uploads. Hello everyone, Someone Bird here, or you can call me Sully. Out of all the things that Disney has brought, there has always been one aspect that I'm personally mixed about, but I always look forward to seeing. More so than their animated feature films, their Pixar films, their Star Wars films, and their Marvel films. And even if I don't like a few of them, I still have a slight defense for them with small bits of what they offer. I'm of course talking about the Disney live-action remakes. With Disney's next live-action remake of The Little Mermaid coming out this Memorial Day weekend, and that it's still Disney's 100th anniversary, it's time that I look over all of Disney's live-action remakes so far, giving my brief thoughts on each one and a favorites ranking, and, for an extra challenge, without comparing them to their original animated counterparts. I know it's hard for everyone, but I believe it's possible to observe these films as their own thing. Plus, I already went over a couple compare and contrast of Disney's original and remakes, and have a couple more for the future. And I'm including sequels, and ones that are technically remakes in some light. So, with all that said, let's get started. The first one is Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book. It's not too entertaining, but it only has small perks, from the cast, the use of real animals, and only one or two jokes I chuckled at. But the narrative is like Jungle Book, but it somehow is also a mix of little other things in it as well, and it sort of feels off. Plus the effects, when used, don't look quite right, a few other jokes seem lame, the bad guys always put the blame on Mowgli when interfering, and though I find the film forgettable once in a while, the quicksand moment is still memorable, and just a bit scary. But overall, there's not much to enjoy for Disney's first remake. 2.5 Mix, or 2.5 minus Mickeys. The second film is 101 Dalmatians. This one's pretty interesting for having real Dalmatians and animals. Some of them are a mix of real animals, CGI, and animatronic, but most of what they do is understandable and even cute without having them talk. And the effects are pretty good and pretty subtle. Plus the acting of Jeff Daniels as Roger, and Julie Richardson as Anita are well, Hugh Laurie as Jasper and Mark Williams as Horace are quite fun, and Glenn Close as Cruella de Vil is wickedly good, especially when she laughs or gets mad. Yet this film is written by John Hughes, and the comedy ranges from being subtle, which gave me a chuckle, to doing Home Alone-style slapstick that isn't quite as funny, but I did chuckle every now and then. And there's a fart noise which seems unnecessary. And outside of one moment of contradiction between Roger and Anita, and an occasional odd edit, this film is a very neat one, for the live actors doing their part, even Cruella, the subtle effects, and an occasional funny bit. 3 Mickeys. The third film is 102 Dalmatians, and this one's an original sequel to the 1996 film, which has Glenn Close return as Cruella de Vil, and the only other connection to the previous film is Dipstick, one of the puppies grown up and owned by Chloe. Yet the whole film is alright. The effects are as fine as the last film, almost with Oddball the Spotless Dalmatian. The humor isn't as funny, but one line of dialogue from Walsworth McCall did make me laugh, and Cruella's end felt better than in the last film. Other than one story point I didn't like much, and intervals of one of the songs during the film's score, an odd reenactment of The Lady and the Tramp while that film is being shown for the dogs, it's a nearly decent one. 2.5 plus Mickeys. But the one that supposedly started this trend in a big way is Alice in Wonderland, and this one is quite alright. It has some nice visuals, good effects, especially of ones that are subtle, and some of the characters are kind of enjoyable, with my favorites being the Cheshire Cat, the Dormouse, and the Mad Hatter. Yet its story is as mad as its characters and a bit of a mess, feeling more like a loose sequel. But I definitely wanted the original story, and Tim Burton as the director seems nearly perfect for it, and it was a slight disappointment when I initially saw it. Yet despite its jumbled story, I like it enough for the visuals and effects, the characters and dark atmosphere, and Danny Elfman's music. The madness of it all might be the point, and it feels like it, but I don't fully get it. 2.5 plus, or 2.5 mixed Mickeys. One film that's not a full-on remake, but technically is for one scene, is The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Yet this film is a decent and kinda fun one. Outside of a couple of awkward moments and an abrupt ending, I did enjoy this movie for its cool effects, the performances of Nicolas Cage as Balthazar and Alfred Molina as Horvat, several funny moments I laughed at, and some of the understanding of combining magic and science, which sounds off but somehow manages to work together, even if I can't explain why. In short, I had a good time watching this film. There's plenty of fun to be had in this, and it's pretty well made. 2.5 plus, or 3 Mickeys. Maleficent, on the other hand, is kind of interesting. It's a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, but with the focus on the villain Maleficent and of her being an anti-hero of sorts. That is, Maleficent takes care of Aurora and not the three fairies, and King Stephen's the villain, and it's an okay one? I like the effects, and Angelina Jolie as Maleficent has a bit of charm to her, giving some striking looks with some nice lighting. Though the three fairies, Prince Philip, and some of King Stephen did falter the film a bit for me with how they're shown. It's an okay and almost interesting take with some role reversals, but not too much to grasp. 2.5 mixed Mickeys. Next is Cinderella, and it's a nice one. It's pretty much the original fairy tale as told, but has more to present. There are neat things in this, from some added character development, to some nice angles and camera shots, to the cute mice, and to the effects, sets, and costumes that are colorful and bright. And outside of one shot that I found too odd to forget, this is a neat and seemingly simple fable with a bit more dynamic to its characters and even some magic. 2.5 plus, or 3 Mickeys. The one remake everyone agrees on as good is The Jungle Book, and for my taste it's alright, but I wouldn't say it's the best of them. It does have a slight different direction from the original book, the actors voicing the animals seem perfect, the effects are well done, and there's a bit of a dark tone to it. Yet I feel like it could have done a bit more, and could have been more grand and big. There are songs in this film, but there's not a lot of them, and they're very brief. And I almost wish it was a musical given some implications. And despite the parts I like about it, it's alright. But I don't see it as good as everyone's making it out to be, as the whole film wasn't grabbing me, even when I got what was happening. And overall, I think it's a bit overrated. But that's how I feel. 2.5 mixed Mickeys. Alice Through the Looking Glass is the sequel to the 2010 film. It has more color than the last film and involves time travel and has a better narrative. The old characters are the same, yet slightly redesigned, and the new characters are okay. But despite that, it's not quite as memorable as the previous film. But there's a couple of moments that I felt were odd to me, and what enjoyment or charm I liked in the last film felt missing, especially with Tim Burton being the producer and not directing it. It's weird that I like this one less for all the good it has, since the previous film's problem is the story. If Burton had directed this and the elements of the last film are in this one, I would have liked it more. Yet for now, it's not quite much for me to get behind. 2.5 mixed Mickeys. Pete's Dragon is a live-action remake of a live-action film, but it's one of those films that just happens or exists. I like the effects of Elliot even when going invisible and him behaving like a dog. The songs, while not a musical per se, are neat and the score is fine. But it's a fantasy drama that doesn't have much in the way of entertaining, with bits of humor that isn't much, and sometimes it takes itself seriously, with little dialogue yet enough to fully get. It's not too boring of a film, but it nearly felt like one. It's okay for the effects, songs, and score, but not much for the rest of it. 2.5 mixed Mickeys. Yet Beauty and the Beast is quite wonderful. The characters are good, the effects are great and detailed, the songs are fun, The look of it all is beautiful and sometimes colorful, and the story is nice and rich with added character developments. Plus, there's a few moments I did laugh at, and a moment that almost got me teary-eyed. And outside of a couple of issues I had with Emma Watson as Belle, and not for the singing as she does fine with it and even did very well acting-wise in the film, and one or two other things that are kind of questionable, this is quite a lovely film that's just as enjoyable as everything that's shown in it. 3 Mickeys. With Christopher Robin, it's a film that's quite special and pretty charming, that takes inspiration from Hook of Christopher Robin having grown up. And many things in this are either clever, funny, sweet, or endearing. And there are some tender moments that nearly left me teary-eyed. Plus Jim Cummings voicing Pooh and Tigger and Brad Garrett voicing Eeyore, and a couple of songs from Richard M. Sherman of the Sherman Brothers are quite nice. And I say this is more simple and subtle than what Hook is. There's rarely a moment I dislike in this, and what comes out of it is as delightful and lovable as its characters and situations. 3 Mickeys. Dumbo is kind of okay, but not by much. It's fine for the effects, with Dumbo being a cute-looking elephant, the music, and some of its look. Yet for the most part, it's sort of lackluster, even for a Tim Burton movie where his style and sense of wonder is very minimal. Not to mention a muted color palette. It's another one of those films that happens and I appreciate what it does and tries to do, but it didn't grab me too much. 2.5 Mixed Mickeys. As for Aladdin, it's actually pretty good. I do enjoy the characters, the comedy, though at times awkward, is sometimes funny, the effects are neat and sometimes cool, the sets and costumes are pretty and colorful, and the songs are amazing and fun. Yet at times certain points did felt like a drag, and they could have gone through them a bit quicker, which includes one or two insights of the characters, especially for Aladdin and maybe Jasmine. Apart from that, and the casting of Jafar I think is fine, I like this one for all of the effects, the look and color, the songs, the characters, and the humor. And even Will Smith as the genie. 3 Mickeys. But The Lion King is a film that tries, but not to a full extent. While it's technically an anime remake of an anime feature, with both characters and background done in photorealistic CGI, except for the opening shot, it does look well made and even convincing. Yet having the animals move like real animals but still talk isn't a bad choice, but hearing the emotion and not seeing it portrayed is likely a fail, and it only worked on occasion. Yet the songs are fine, the humor is okay, with a few chuckles from me, and the score of Hans Zimmer is alright. However, I found that most of it didn't go far enough, and what's given is okay, but not too much. 2.5 Mix, or 2.5 minus Mickeys. Maleficent, Mistress of Evil is kind of a mad one. It's the sequel to the 2014 film, but my thoughts on this are less than the last film. There's an obvious villain with a prejudice, several moments I've found unfair, especially in the battle at the end, which felt long. Maleficent is feared again, despite the film taking place in a different kingdom. There's creatures like Maleficent which are fine, and humor that's either okay or lame. As such, it's a different story from the previous film, but not too much that I've found enjoyment out of. The film works for an occasional joke, some new characters, and the effects are fine, but everything else to me is just not grabbing. 2.5 Mixed Mickeys. Next is Lady and the Tramp, and this one's pretty interesting with its cute and sometimes lovable animals, fine songs, and nice look and lighting. In short, I like this one. It's not too mean-spirited or depressing, but it's a serviceable one, except for one or two questionable bits. But overall, it's pretty fine. 2.5 plus Mickeys. Up next is Mulan, the first remake to get a PG-13 rating and one that's almost decent. It has good action, neat stunts, fine effects when needed, and a nice looking soundtrack. Although the way it goes is pretty questionable. Mulan has a gift known as Qi, which is special to a warrior but makes a woman a witch. Yet the Qi part of her felt unnecessary and contrived. Instead of having her be a warrior naturally, she uses a power to make her fights easy to finish. I guess it's trying to make a connection with the witch and adding, I believe, some Chinese philosophy to it, but that added element seems to kill the film logically. It does fine with everything else, even if the humor doesn't grab me, but the way the chi is portrayed, shown, and implemented in the story makes little to no sense. 2.5 plus, or 2.5 mixed Mickeys. Next is Cruella, and it's a prequel to 101 Dalmatians, showing the origins of Cruella de Vil, and it's fine. Although, I say that because the way it's presented is not what I expected. Cruella is made as an anti-hero type, which feels off when knowing what will happen next, unless it's meant to be in another universe. But despite that, and the film's PG-13 rating being a soft one in instances where I felt it was a bit tame, other things like the rest of the characters, the costumes, and the soundtrack for a film taking place in the 60s and 70s are all pretty well done. Kind of a mixed bag for me, but the amount of highlights I have for the film isn't much given Cruella's character and things not going far enough. 2.5 mixed Mickeys. Yet Pinocchio is not that bad. Despite some bits that seem creepy to me, an occasional lame joke, or effects that look off at times, I think it's an okay one. The other effects are good, the songs are alright, Pleasure Island looks colorful, it all looks nice and lighted pretty well, the casting of the Blue Fairy is okay, even if used for one scene, and one or two creepy bits felt right for the film. And yet, I almost like it even if it didn't work all the time. But I get the little things that go on in this one. As such, it's a nearly fine film. 2.5 plus Mickeys. And finally, it's Peter Pan and Wendy. It's pretty much the original Peter Pan story, but with several changes to the narrative that seem alright and I appreciate, in particular with the friendship and backstory of Captain Hook and Peter Pan. Yet there are a couple of moments that I felt were a bit disappointing, like the crocodile only used for one scene, and despite not seeing much of the mermaid, it looks alright. Plus, Tiger Lily has more involvement in the film. The Lost Boys also include twin girls, and their place is really massive. The effects look nice, a couple of the songs are fine, and I don't mind the casting of Tinkerbell at all. Though it has a muted color palette that looks dull and not a whole lot to leave me entertained, yet invested in what's happening. So overall, it's okay. 2.5 mixed Mickeys. So, that's all the Disney live-action remakes so far, and overall, they're not too bad as their own thing. Some I like, some I don't, others were in the middle. But I'm hoping for the best to come out of Little Mermaid and future remakes, and I do recommend them regardless of what I say. And in a time where there's more flops than successes for theaters, many of which I feel don't deserve to fail, I definitely want everyone to check out The Little Mermaid, and perhaps with an open mind and to not make too many comparisons, because these are here to entertain and to be enjoyed as they are, and they're never going to be replacing the originals anytime soon, because they're trying to be different retellings of familiar stories. In which case, I'm looking forward to the later remakes, and for Disney to keep improving and making things better. And that is it. So thank you for joining me. Like, comment, subscribe, follow on Facebook or Twitter, support me on Patreon, and tune in next time for a new video. And thanks for your time.